Jake, I got some really bad news for you. There are these things called spy satellites.
No, we know
and they can
about those.
see everything.
Well, no, it's obvious they've been sending these balloons over here for a while. I just thought your framing as it was errant, as in it straight off course. Do you think it was, I'm sincerely asking, do you think it was errant? It was an accident?
Here's the thing. It's such a harebrained scheme to send a balloon flying over American territory that the Occam's razor explanation here is that they somehow lost control over it. And these things are not steerable. So my guess is that it probably wasn't deliberate just because of how stupid a plan it would be and how obvious it would be. But it could be. I don't really know. What I do know is that the whole nation got in a lather and a tizzy and started hyperventilating about this balloon. And it just shows how reflexively hawkish the media is. It's like, hey, can we just wrap up this war in Ukraine before we start another war with an even more formidable superpower?
The balloon got more attention than us blowing up Nord Stream.
Exactly.
Well, hold on. We're ready to jump into it. What I would say about that is the media insight is the valid one. I was just responding to the errant, and I was curious if you actually thought it was an accident. I don't think it's an accident. I don't think there are accidents.
Well, I think it clearly was off course and problematic. So, I don't know about the intentionality of it. I think it very well could have been intentional, but I tend to think because it's such a stupid harebrained scheme, I almost give them the benefit of the doubt, not because they're not capable of spying. I'm sure
Obviously
they're spying on us, just like we're spying on them. That's what we both do. But it seems like such a stupid way because you're going to get caught.
It's a made-for-TV moment. You have to understand the nature of live television and why the media overreacted to it. It's ongoing. So because it's not final, it's like a live event occurring, like when kids are trapped in a mine. Those are the best stories for CNN because you can keep updating people and people keep turning the TV on to check on the status. So this one was just made for CNN because obviously we're going to shoot the thing down, and obviously you can interpret into it if it's an accident or not, and it just gives them something to talk about on a slow news week. But it is interesting. I think your point that is interesting. Is the Nord Stream story correct or not? Why is that not being covered?
I think it's not being covered because the mainstream media already took a side on this.
Oh, so even remember, more cynical,
Well, it's not just cynical. So when Nord Stream got blown up, the administration came racing out with the line that the Russians did it. That this was self-sabotage. And by the way, the media repeated this endlessly. And it never really made sense to anyone who's paying attention because, first of all, this was an economically vital asset to Russia. Second, it was their main source of leverage over Europe was their control over the gas supply. So the idea that they would shoot themselves in the foot just to somehow, show how crazy they are, it never really made sense. And the fact that the administration and the media so quickly raced to that conclusion suggested that it was maybe a cover story. Because if we had nothing to do with it, you would just be more neutral and say, yeah, we don't know what happened. But they had to promote this line that, the Russians did it, which just never made any sense. And now Cy Hirsch has come out with this story, so it laying out in great detail how we did it. It's not just saying we did it. It's laying out who did it and how and the steps and all that kind of stuff. And just so you guys understand who this guy is, he's this legendary Pulitzer Prize winning journalist. He's 86 years old or something like that now. He broke the story of the My Lai massacre, which the military denied until he proved it. He broke the story during the Iraq War of the Abu Ghraib prison abuses, which again, the military denied until it was undeniable.
He's Pulitzer winning is all you really need to know.
Yeah, and here he's
a Pulitzer winning journalist.
Basically another covert military action.
Do you think that Europe knew, that the Europeans were told that the Americans were going to go and blow this thing up?
If that's true. By the way, the administration has said clearly this is a false story.
They said it was pure fiction. I think the specific quote was, this is pure fiction.
The Ukraine would be the most likely person to do this.
Capability. You got to look for means, motive, and opportunity.
They don't have the opportunity to go down
there.
The
story, I don't think the Ukrainians have the capability to do an undersea mission like that.
Interesting.
The Norwegians do, and the story maintained that we did it with them. The British do. The story didn't say whether they were involved or not. So no, my guess is that if this was a covert U.S. activity, it was kept to a very small group, which is why it'll be hard to prove more definitively than this.
The other side of the argument is this is such a provocation, and the administration saying it's fiction. So what is your response to that, Sachs? Would the U.S. do something so provocative, or would they have somebody else do it? And would Norway do something so provocative? It seems like an extremely offensive technique as opposed to just backing the Ukraine to defend itself against Russia's invasion.
Here's the thing. Before the invasion, Biden at a press conference said that if the Russians invade, Nord Stream would be no more. And they asked him, well, how can you make sure of that? That's a deal between Germany and Russia. We're not involved. And he said, we have ways. We have ways. Just trust me, it'll happen. Separately, Victoria Nuland, who's our Deputy Secretary of State, said something very similar about how we would stop Nord Stream if the Russians invaded. And then after Nord Stream got blown up, Blinken at a press conference said that this was a wonderful opportunity and was extolling all the benefits of this. And then Victoria Nuland at a congressional hearing said that I'm sure we're all very glad that it's a hunk of metal at the bottom of the sea, again, extolling all the benefits. And we've discussed the benefits on this program of now we've shifted the European dependence on Russian gas to a dependence on American gas. So the fact of the matter is the administration kind of telegraphed what they were going to do. They had the capability to do it, and they had the motive to do it. So it's certainly a plausible story. You're right that we can't know for sure. It's a single source story.
You don't believe the
It's a
administration.
single source story that depends
saying.
On the credibility of Cy Hirsch. But as it stands right now, whose story do I think makes more sense? Probably Cy Hirsch's.
You believe Cy Hirsch over the spokesperson for the CIA who wrote, the claim is completely and utterly false, just to be clear.
Well, these same people denied Abu Ghraib.
Okay,
they denied My Lai. They deny everything.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, this is one of these situations where we can't possibly know.
Yeah, you make a good point, J. Cal, which is this, if true, and look, I'm not saying I don't know if it's...
You're leaning towards believing it.
I lean towards thinking it's more plausible than not.
Okay.
Because also, like, who else could have done it? And who had the motive, means, and opportunity? But you make a great point, which is if we did it, it's an incredibly provocative act. It's basically perpetrating an act of war against a country that has thousands of nuclear weapons. Biden promised us at the beginning of this war that he would keep us out of being directly involved. So this would directly contradict what he said at the beginning of this war. So I think it's a very scary situation here.
Yeah, no, yeah.
If the U.S. didn't do it, like, why don't we find the real killer?
I have the theory. Here's my theory. The CIA knew how to do it. Biden wants to do it. The Republicans want to do it. Obviously, the people who are the most pro-stopping Nord Stream have been the Republicans. They've led this charge even more than the Democrats. So it's a bipartisan issue. Stop Nord Stream, bipartisan issue, hands down. I think the CIA probably knew how to do it. And just like we equipped the Ukraine to do it, we might have facilitated the Ukraine and a collaborator, UK, Norway, some freelancers. You know, we have those freelance former Navy SEALs that operate. Perhaps the CIA just said to the Ukraine, here's a, black ops group. If you wanted to engage them, you could feel free to do so, which would then split the difference between what Cy is saying and what the CIA is saying, which is typically where the truth lies, is probably between what this investigative journalist of note has said and what the CIA is denying. The CIA probably has plausible deniability. That's my prediction.
Well, if you could find a source for that story, J. Cal, that lays out in the same level of detail that Hirsch has laid out in terms of the meetings that occurred, what was approved when, how they did it, when they did it, the explosives they used, the divers they used, it goes into a fair amount of detail.
Incredible detail.
But you're trying to put what you just said, which is basically you inventing a story, on the same level as Hirsch's story.
Yeah, theory.
Yeah, I understand. But he actually has a lot of detail in his story.
The other thing I wonder, Sachs, is with this one source story, he has a collaboration with the New Yorker. They would love to have the ratings for this story. This is a blockbuster story. You have the media, you got the CIA.
It's fodder for a great movie.
The media wasn't willing to entertain any of those theories when this news broke. What do? They blamed the Russians. And that story made no sense, but they said it so definitively. They didn't push it that hard. What was interesting is that the media really ran with it. And when people on both the left and the right, like people like Jeffrey Sachs on the left and Tucker Carlson on the right, basically started to question whether the U.S. could have done it. They were accused of being conspiracy theorists. And now all of a sudden, here comes Seymour Hersh with a pretty detailed story lending credence to that point of view. By the way, speaking of which, Radek Sikorski, who is a Polish diplomat, I think he was like their foreign minister, when Nord Stream blew up, he tweeted a photo of it saying, "Thank you, USA," which was one of the reasons why people thought that, okay, like, yeah, of course the US did it. Who has the capability to do it? Who has the motive to do it? Who said they were going to do it? Who benefits?
Who was conducting NATO exercises in that region 3 months before the thing blew up?
Yeah, exactly.
President Joe Biden declared that, this is from Bloomberg, that a massive leak from the Nord Stream gas pipeline system in the Baltic Sea was an intentional act and that the Russian statements about the incident shouldn't be trusted. It was a deliberate act of sabotage, and now the Russians are pumping out disinformation and lies, Biden told reporters Friday at the White House.
If you actually look at what Biden said, everything he said is absolutely true if the U.S. also did it.
Correct.
Every single sentence that Joe Biden said is 100% true, whether we did it or whether Russia did it.
Well, what do the Germans think? Because this is the Germans' pipeline. So if we blew it up, would they not also see that as a hostile act?
I'm curious, did the Germans say anything when this happened?
No, not that I know of.
I'm looking for I was literally just typed to Nick, what was the Germans' position on this? Germany's position is just, hey, everybody, this is sabotage. So that's it.
Okay, there was a really interesting video that a guy named Matt Orfalia, who puts together these really funny videos of media reactions to things. And what he shows is that, you can have like 20 different media outlets and they all use the exact same words. And when he clips it together, you can see that they're reading from somebody's talking points and it's not really clear who. And basically, if you look at his video here on who blew up Nord Stream pipeline, you see that there was like a party line from the mainstream media on this stuff.
On Nord Stream 2. We will bring an end to it.
How will you do that?
I promise you we'll be able to do it.
Someone blew up Russia's Nord Stream pipeline.
I mean, we'd have to conclude without the evidence that it's most likely
Russian sabotage on its own infrastructure.
The common sense matter.
I think it's Putin's way of sending a message.
What Putin is saying to us by blowing up his pipeline is, look, I can blow up a pipeline.
Everyone knows that Putin did this himself.
Who are these talking heads?
Smoking gun without the direct proof.
Yeah, I think logic and common sense will tell you that
without the evidence,
Russia was behind the incident.
We can say it for sure.
Who sabotaged the Nord Stream 2 pipeline?
All right, enough. This is nonsense.
Come on, that's hysterical.
It's these talking heads who have no firsthand experience
That's
and they're more than willing to comment on this stuff.
All his videos are like that. And it just makes you realize that there's a narrative around things. The thing to understand is that all of the prestige outlets repeat the same party line and have the same perspective.
Yeah, you got to do your own search for information.
You've got 10 different mainstream media networks or newspapers or magazines, but they all have exactly the same talking points, except maybe Fox News is kind of the one exception. Although even Fox on the whole Nord Stream thing, you saw that Fox can be pretty militaristic, and they had the same generals basically blaming the Russians for this on Fox.